Oh, yes. Welcome to the first ever edition of Dey Dark, where we delve into the darkness of the Cincinnati Bengals world. Paul Dana Jr. here with Mark Shalafu. This is how dark it is, Mark. We opened with the Ron Torbert music just to get people in that headspace where that's the type of show today is going to be.
I mean, you can't ask for a better trigger warning than that music at the top of the show. That lets people know where we're headed with this. We pledged to do this once a year when we found that a Hudday Light was going to be on Friday the 13th. We couldn't even put out the episode that day. We couldn't even record that day thanks to our outage of the platform that we use to record. So Hudday Dark striking in multiple ways.
Yeah, it was. But we're still here. The beginning, the origin story, if you will, of Hudday Dark was essentially you guys really like delving into the darkest topics. We found this as you guys send in emails over the course of the year to the growlerpodcast@gmail.com that sometimes it really consistently goes to the darkest corners. And it's like, okay, it's supposed to be happy and fun in sports, but that's not the core of Bengals fans, the real ones that have been around. They love the darkness. They live for the darkness. They were raised in the darkness. And so once a year, we delve in to those corners and bring all those questions. We've been kind of file them all away. We've put some of the best ones in there, some recent, some older, and save them for Hudday Dark. And so here we are today.
And it's important to remember that, today's show is going to be a little bit darker, but there's still a lot of things to be excited about for this season. So if you are just a regular Hudday Light listener, things will be back to normal next week. We'll have a lot of fun before camp fires up again. And there's a lot of positivity that'll be coming back to the forefront, just not today.
No, but I think there's joy in the darkness. It's shared misery.
Yeah.
It's everyone has been through these experiences together. It bonded them, and we're here to kind of reminisce about them in almost like a fond, cute way, because Joe Burrow is here now for the Bengals. So it does make everything better. If the Bengals were still fighting, like pushing the Andy Dalton rock up the hill like they were through the 2010s, or still in some sort of quarterback hell, or hadn't had recent successful runs, or there's no hope, then it'd be different. It'd be different. You wouldn't, you'd feel bad doing this. But the truth is the team is in a good place. And they should be really good this year. They are one of the favorites to go to the Super Bowl out of the AFC. Things are good. Because of that, I think we can do this comfortably.
Yeah, and I think that was an excellent caveat, because it is easy for Bengals fans just to slip back into that negativity anytime you go back to the Hudday Dark place. So it is important to remember you don't have to stay there, but we are going back there today. And what flag are you flying for Hudday Dark? Is there any? So what's the darkest flag that you own?
Well, technically the darkest flag I own is the Growler flag. It's the black with our logo. But it's not flying today. We Father's Day flag ran a couple extra days late, just got changed when I had to pull it down because of the storm yesterday. So I said, well, I got this here. We'll put it back up. We have our Cincinnati flag, which it's Cincinnati with, instead of the blue lines of the river, it's rainbow lines we put up in June whenever we're not in a holiday specifically in June to celebrate the month of June, Pride Month.
It was a big weekend for you. Flag Day. That's your holiday.
Yeah, Flag Day. I have the DCC cornhole tournament was supposed to go off, but it was spoiled by weather, which is frustrating. That was Hudday Dark striking yet again. But I do have a flag of flags, so it's literally a flag that has a bunch of flags of the world on it. So that always gets prominent display on Flag Day, even though I understand Flag Day is technically for the American flag. I just like to kind of take it to that place, but that's me. I do want to remind everybody, you're never experiencing the darkness. That's at our good friends at BetMGM, down at the banks. Reds have been home. The attendance has been big. Everybody's having fun. Get in there, have some food, make some bets. It's a great time. But if you haven't signed up for the BetMGM app yet, do it. Use the bonus code Growler, and you'll get a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager. You just download the app, you sign up using the bonus code Growler, all caps on that, deposit at least $10, and your first wager put it down on any game, then you'll receive that same bet amount up to $1,500 in a bonus bet if your bet loses. So even if it's dark and you lose, BetMGM says come to the light. And they will give you up to $1,500 in a bonus bet. So just make sure you use the bonus code Growler when you sign up for that, and you can get your $1,500 first bet offer today. Make it happen. All right. What is your Bengals Hudday Dark story of the week? Mark,
Well, I think
where
that
do you start?
For me, I got to start in the current timeline, and I want to run this by you. Looking at all the current Hudday Dark topics that we have that are happening right now, because even last week's shows, they kind of tended to go a little more Hudday Dark anyway. You know, you and
Yeah.
Jay had to cover a lot of Hudday Dark-ish kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was the Hudday Dark appetizer.
It really was. Yeah, you kind of set the table nicely. And I wanted to start in the current world just before we start delving into some of the really painful stuff. So if you had to run, pass, or boot the current issues that are going on, obviously Trey Hendrickson stuff influences this season the most, whether or not that gets done. I heard you and Jay talking about Shamar Stewart and the culture problems that, you know, messing with guys like that can have. And then we got the stadium talks, which is kind of still lurking out there as a potential problem. If that goes south, that could go really south for this franchise.
Or north, or west, or overseas.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So what should I be most concerned about? How would you run, pass, or boot those for what needs to have most of my attention this offseason, or what should I be the most concerned about with those three?
Most concerned about?
Yes.
Well, it depends. I guess, I was thinking of a different lens, but that I was thinking of which one is the darkest, or you could take to the darkest place.
But I mean, it's got to be the team leaving in that case, right?
Yes,
that's the darkest.
that's where I was immediately going to go. Was like, yeah, if the stadium issue truly unravels, which that's not impossible at all as we sit here today. I mean, it can happen. Then there's the true darkest timeline. The team isn't here anymore, right?
Yeah.
That's the end game of that. If it's, when it's the first domino that gets pushed, the little domino ends up in the big domino. That's where you're at with that. Although this might be a little bit bigger of a domino, but I would say that is the most concerning today, because the deadline is, it's the 19th. I mean, the deadline's the 30th. So it's immediate. It's impactful. Not getting this done now will have pretty serious ramifications in terms of the Bengals starting to look around and try to figure out what other options are. There's just no reason for it to go there. Nobody wants to see it go there. No one wants to talk about this topic. That makes it even darker, because it brings up probably the darkest times, and that was the original lease negotiation and everything that happened there, and what's happened since. Like, that whole lease topic might be the darkest topic in all of Bengals history.
Yeah.
And we're kind of back at the precipice of it again. So that one's at the top. Stewart would be second for me, not in concern, but in darkness, because Hendrickson, we've talked about. Hendrickson is what's happening with Trey Hendrickson, everybody deals with.
Yeah.
In some capacity. Teams are dealing with it everywhere. TJ Watt in Pittsburgh and others that are trying to get deals, and Max Crosby's gone through it. Like, everybody goes through this, where your star players who are getting older, and how do you deal with that? And they're still valuable, but that's a constant thing. And the Bengals had a complicated offseason, and we've sort of gone back and forth in the debate where you can see either way, you can understand what they're doing. So that goes behind the Stewart thing. Is like, this isn't happening to other teams. Why is this happening? How are we dropping another piece of this into all of this constant issues between negotiations with players and ownership? And so to me, that one would be ahead of that. So stadium, Stewart, and then Hendrickson, while it's maybe the most impactful on this year, it's also the most normal of all of these.
Yeah. And there's still, for the Hudday Light listeners that are still stuck around, there's a chance that everything has worked out, 6 weeks from now, and everybody's happy. But that's, at least I know now where to put most of my concern, and it's on stadium first. That's got to be the first good thing to happen, I guess, coming up. What is your favorite Hudday Dark topic?
Okay, I have one. I feel like when I think of this, when I think of Hudday Dark, I think it's ranking the worst moments. Okay, and in terms of Bengals history, I'm kind of just gonna go from 1990 on. I don't. like you get back, things were great in the 80s, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they went to 2 Super Bowls, Anthony Munoz, offensive line, Boomer, Icky Shuffle, Ken Anderson. Things were fun. Things were great. And I don't want to try to pretend going back to the 70s. Try to keep it in a little bit more recent. Since 90s nostalgia is the thing, we'll just basically start from that time frame.
I
I
don't know
like
the people that were big fans in the 70s are listening to podcasts anyway, Like
yeah,
our demo, you're right,
or
it's
with us,
90s fans or with
yeah.
us.
It's
Yep.
Dey Dark. Okay, let's be honest. And so you're right. So let's keep it there. So if we're talking about, I'm going worst draft picks since 1990. Okay, by the Bengals and a ranking. So I'm going to go top 5, and then after this we'll do. You had a social media question that was basically worst moments. So I think there's enough things to delve into that I wanted to separate worst draft picks from worst kind of more on-field moments. There's always, the ultimate number one. I don't know that it will ever be dethroned, and it has to be Achilles Smith at number 1 for me. I
Oof.
don't think there's really much discussion. It's the Achilles and what he became. It's the trade offer from New Orleans. It's the most ridiculous offer that's ever been rejected in the history of the NFL, offering like essentially multiple drafts to move back a few spots, everything that the Saints offered. And then Achilles ushering in whatever the hell that was in terms of quarterback play. And as we know it now, people warning the Bengals, no, please don't make this decision. Coaches on staff being like on the flight back from Oregon being like, we should not draft this guy.
Yeah.
And yet it happens anyway. They reject the offer. They go for the quarterback and he turns into Achilles Smith. To me, let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah.
That's number 1. I don't think it can ever be topped in terms of the ramifications. Set the franchise back essentially until Marvin Lewis rebooted it in 2003. Boom.
Yeah,
That's
let's
not that's
hope
number
that
1.
it can't be worse than that. Well, let's hope that stands the test of time as by far the worst draft move that this franchise has had.
I'd put it up there with worst in NFL history. So, I'd have to get some writers from other teams to have that conversation with me. Number 2 is I'm almost gonna combine 2 and 3, which is kind of unfair to number 3 here.
Yes.
But I'm gonna say John Ross is 2
Wow.
because Patrick Mahomes was 10. John Ross at 9, Patrick Mahomes at 10. You had the same situation as the Kansas City Chiefs. The same. You had Andy Dalton, who was Cincinnati Alex Smith. If you had foresight, if you could have seen what Patrick Mahomes could become, would he have become Patrick Mahomes as we know today if he would have been here in Cincinnati with Marvin Lewis and his staff versus Andy Reid, the quarterback whisperer? I don't know. There's a reason he ended up there. They concede, and that's fine. But to pick John Ross, who turned into what John Ross turned into, which a very nice man. I enjoyed getting to know him. Football was not it. And pass on Patrick Mahomes. I think it passes a lot of things that happened in the 90s. And I know that might surprise people, but it does for me. But I combine it with Billy Price the next year. So you miss on the quarterback. You have Lamar Jackson in the building pre-draft. And the center gets taken from you. And you're like, I don't believe in Lamar Jackson. I'm not going to take Lamar Jackson. And you take Billy Price. Billy Price turns into that. Lamar Jackson turns into this. MVP quarterbacks sitting there while you had the middle of the road quarterback. And we've professed love for Andy Dalton, the person here on many times. So I'm not going to, this is not besmirching his name. It's just the nature of a middle of the road quarterback. And both times went for players that turned into complete busts. So that's kind of the recent drop into what's been a pretty consistent top 5 of 90s busts for a long time. I would put them over. I have Klingler at 4 and Kajana at 5. The number, like Kajana gets hurt in the preseason. They didn't. What are you going to do? They took a chance. They were aggressive trading up, trying to take a chance. They were trying to be fun and exciting. I don't hate that. The result was terrible, obviously. They could have had Tony Baselli playing opposite Willie Anderson for a decade, and that's kind of hurtful.
Yeah,
when you
just a
think
little
of it
bit.
that way, just a little bit that way, or taking Big Daddy Wilkinson instead of Marshall Faulk, right? Like,
Yep.
tough scene there. But all right, valuing defensive tackle, I don't hate it, but so that's why I have Kajana there. The honorable mention to the Ogbuehi Fisher combo that ran out Andrew Whitworth and ushered in terrible offensive line play for a long, long time.
And I do think you at least need to give an honorable mention to Jackson Carman, just for the newer fans that have that vitriol built up, that venom, because of how desperately they needed him to be a good pick. And so many people didn't like the pick when it happened. And, he had some sketchiness, and it just never kind of turned into anything positive. And he was kind of a scapegoat for his entire time here. I think it's not going to pass anything on your top 5, but it could get the honorable mention in there.
Yeah, to me, when you're a second-round pick, you take on that risk. There's a reason this guy is there in the second round. I mean, these guys I mentioned are all first-round picks, I guess, outside of the Fisher extension with the Ogbuehi there. But, I mean, but they knew they had to get that one right because they went for the receiver with Jamar Chase in the first round, knowing it needed to be kind of a combination pick. If you're passing on Penei Sewell, you need to be getting it right because you have a bunch of good interior offensive linemen there in the second round, and they didn't. Creed Humphrey's available, Aaron Banks, these players that you get. We're not going to go down that road. Real careers, and where you could have had him, you could have. We're not going to go there. We're not going to go there. You could have stayed put Christian Barmore. Let's just not go there. The Carman pick, if he's good. Do they win at least one of the next 2 Super Bowls? I would actually say probably, because guard play became such a big issue in their biggest games. But that's dark. Now we're on. Now we're running. Okay.
Yeah.
Now
we're flowing. Even with like David Klingler, that one's a little bit tougher for me because he's one of the biggest draft busts ever. But at the time, wasn't that a little bit more defensible pick? Didn't he have just insane numbers at Houston? That wasn't a pick that everybody hated at the time, was it? I was not old enough.
Well, it wasn't great. I mean, he was never really good. He was playing,
I thought he had a bunch of records.
The NFL wasn't ready for the run and shoot. I don't know if David Klingler was ready for the NFL, and he certainly wasn't ready for the Bengals. And there was like a holdout immediately, and it was all of that was bad. I would say, I would in a different time. I would like to see if it would, or in a different place, if his career would have gone in a different way. Maybe it would have been better. But you also ran out Boomer, essentially, and the move out of there was David Klingler, who was just unfortunately the symbol of a lot of bad Dave Shula teams. They kind of went hand in hand there together, which is tough.
Yeah, when you're talking about that baton toss from Boomer to Klingler like that, that sort of sums up a lot of different issues.
A lot of how it went from the glory of the 80s to what the lost decade became. What was our social media question?
So the thing that I put out on social media on Friday was, what were some of the worst on-field moments from the last 25 years? So we're keeping it a little bit more recent. It doesn't have to be the absolute worst. Whatever made you feel the worst as a fan is kind of what we're getting towards. And what were some of the worst on-field moments, taking away some of these draft busts that we've just discussed at length? I mean, obviously, the Carson Palmer injury is got to be number one. That's
I mean, to where that team was going. The Carson injury is the Achilles Smith. It's going to be a hard one to ever top.
Yeah.
In terms of the potential of that team, the love for the 05 team. I mean, I've talked about this. I think I talked about it with Jim when I had him on a couple weeks ago for our Memory Lane episode. But I did that in 2015, I did a whole 10-year retrospect on the 05 team because they were so beloved. Maybe one of the maybe outside of the recency of the 21 team, the most beloved team, in this era that we're talking about. Just because they were pulling the Bengals out of the doldrums. They were exciting. They were winning for the first time. They were on national TV. They were relevant. Palmer and Chad and TJ and Chris Henry and all the things that came along with that offense. They were just amazing. and they really energized the fan base unlike anything we'd ever seen. And it was like, and here comes the run, against their arch rival that they hate, who they finally had their number that year. And it was like, you know what? This is the year they're going to stick it to the Steelers finally. And then truly the worst thing ever happens immediately. You don't even get to like enjoy the one first good play. I don't know how that's topped. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it's always possible. It's always possible for something to happen worse, but that to me is it's the Achilles Smith of this topic.
Yeah, it's the runaway number one. You have to combine others just to kind of make it a little bit more competitive, just because of how stark that flipped things so quickly. And there was so much optimism for the first time. Yeah, that's definitely number one. What else do you have up there?
I think it's similarly. I think 2 is also Steelers, and it's the meltdown at Paul Brown. I think it's the playoff game 10 years later, and everything that went down there is the high of the interception by Vontaze Burfict, and then the unfolding of the final minute plus of Jeremy Hill's fumble, Antonio Brown's beginning of his CTE, and then the fight, Pac-Man and Burfict, and everything that happened there, and the field goal, and the game was beyond bonkers. I mean, everything, it was as controversial. There was so much fallout to that, still to this day. But the biggest one being it was the buildup of Marvin Lewis's then 0-7 in the playoffs. That all had been building for years to this moment, and it goes down like that with the undisciplined end. That's a tough one. So I had to have that. I'd have that at number 2.
I mean, even when, it was when Jeremy Hill fumbled that ball and Ben Roethlisberger came back into the game. That's when you sort of knew, it was like, oh, this is not going to end the way that I want this to end.
And he couldn't throw the ball more than like 5 yards.
Yep. And you knew what was happening. Yep. And it was just such a close one. Like that should have been every 99 times that's going to be a win. Right. And that's going to be the cathartic breaking of that drought. So
there should be a statue of AJ Green with his, like, in a Jordan pose, catching the ball over top of 2 Steelers. There should be a statue outside of the stadium right now, but instead there's not. Well, there's no statues, which is also dark.
This is what I want to throw at you. Where do you put the Damar Hamlin thing? Because that was, a game that they were gonna crush the Bills in, and that's sort of a traumatic thing for people to see, and they were psyched for that. And how do you kind of properly assess that? Because it's not the typical Hudday Dark moment as the rest of these lists are, that are just pure agony from a fan perspective. This is a little bit broader.
He didn't die, and it turned into a great thing. He's still playing. I mean, he's somehow losing the Comeback Player of the Year award, but he's like, it ended up being a great moment for the city, for UC, for modern medicine, for America. Like, it was cool to see what happened in the aftermath. The fright of that moment was crazy, but you know what? I thought, and some would say this would be our darkest day. I believe it was our finest hour. Apollo 13 drop, as people expect from me here. But that to me, it was the point of that. So I don't view that as dark. The moment immediately was dark and it was scary, but so much good came out of it that I have a hard time in retrospect. If you would have asked me this 10 minutes after it happened and everyone was still like crying on the field and the ambulance was going off, like, yeah, darkest moment ever in the NFL. But it wasn't. It wasn't. Modern medicine and the people at UC and the first responders on the field, everybody made it so that it wasn't. Light amidst the darkness. So I'm not going there. I'm not going there with it.
It still was a pretty dark fan experience to have to be there for that. Like, having the game just postponed, just canceled, just pulled out from under you, and you leave that stadium thinking, like, is this guy even alive? What did I just bring my kids to witness? Usually the worst thing you're going to see, from a fan perspective, is a fist fight 2 rows behind you. This is a little bit more traumatic of an experience, but you're right. The aftermath at least does color that a little bit differently. and in a much more positive tone.
I would say let's throw in some not honorable mention. Third is Burrow's wrist in Baltimore.
Yeah.
The like tries to throw it and can't moment, I think,
Yeah. That was
is where you
crushing.
realize and the fallout from that of football mortality and everything that came with that. We're still talking about that. I mean, he just asked about that again in his most recent presser. So to me, and the potential of that season, it sort of started the obvious demise of the next year and a half and fallout we've felt since then. So Burrow wrist, I think, is up there. I wonder where we put the end of the Super Bowl in here.
Yeah.
Like,
that was another good question.
Whether it's the Logan Wilson penalty, whether it's Jamar Chase running past a fallen Jalen Ramsey while Burrow gets taken down. Like I wonder, because there was so much joy in making it to that point and a feeling that they had a run. Everybody appreciated the run, but only get to the Super Bowl so many times, 3 times in history, and to be right there and feel like you could have had a chance and these things happen. It's probably up there. But I wonder, just because of the fact of you did make it to that moment, that it's not at the top. Whereas you feel like something was truly stolen from you with the Carson injury and the meltdown and Burrow's wrist, of what that season could have been, where yeah, maybe winning the Super Bowl was potentially stolen from you there, but you did make it all the way to the end.
You made it to the Super Bowl.
Brought a lot of joy. Brought a lot of joy in the process.
A high water mark for
at
least the early Burrow era. Maybe not the high water mark of his time here, but it's still a pretty special moment, just breaking that playoff drought, getting to the Super Bowl. So it is tough to have that higher than some of these other things. But to get so close to winning the Super Bowl, that's dark. That moment, it's like, man, we were right there. We had this. This could have been it. This could have been the first one. And you don't know.
Ron Sorry, everybody. It's just got to happen. Throw in Dalton's thumb. The Brad St. Louis botched snap in Denver in 2006 would be up there. I'm sure you guys have some as well. That's kind of my general list. You guys have lots of questions though, so I don't want to waste too much time with our lists. So let's get to some of these questions.
All right. So again, all your questions, you can send them to us at thegrowlerpodcast@gmail.com. We're going to start things off here with this one from Terrence. He says, "Hi, Paul. I enjoy and appreciate the podcast. Been a fan of the Bengals for as long as they've existed. You recently spoken about your exasperation that you and others feel with the Bengals front office. I share that very deep frustration. My question is, whose psychology is it that directs the organization? I assume Mike Brown, but is it also Katie, Troy? It's so specific and consistent. I'd characterize it as stubborn, self-defeating, angry, defiant. I could go on. You speak of specific players that are in dispute with the organization, but it is named as just that, the organization. Do you know where this comes from? Is Mike Brown there all along? So it's easy to identify his part in this, but who else is responsible? I guess the sub question is there hope for the post-Mike Brown era?" And I will say, this is from Terrence. He's also mentioned that he's got a PhD in his email signature. So I like that. Our audience is very educated.
Yeah.
We did get a lot of questions that went along this line, though, and we'll read one more after this. But there was a lot of questions about ownership and that sort of stuff. So, but this was one of the better ones.
Talking about ownership is the darkest timeline.
Yes.
There's like, this is, and that's why when you go through them and it's like, how many of these are there? Different versions of essentially this. We just kind of pulling out a couple. I'll say this. I do think that certainly Mike set the tone and determined how the family would run this franchise in the 90s, like in the 2000s. I mean, that's what it was. I have a bit of a soft spot for Mike because I do think he is improperly characterized and villainized in a lot of senses. I think he is if you ask people, if you talk to people that really know him and know the organization, that have been inside of there, you won't hear bad words about Mike Brown. You won't, because he takes care of his people that he feels like that play for him. He loves his players. He runs his business like a business, and he runs it hard, and we all know that. And clearly the way they negotiate with stuff, that's known as a businessman, as how he operates. But in terms of taking care of people, helping people, and what he does for players after they're out, things to set people up for life or when they need help, and just the way I think he helps keep the organization together today. He's backed out. He's not as in the middle as he once was at all. But I think he still helps keep it going in the right direction, more so than probably people would think. And so for that, I just want to say that I feel like there's a bit of an improper villainization of Mike in that regard. I think that what is happening with the rest of the family is they're trying to figure out the future of the organization and what they want it to look like. And right now it's been contentious, and it's been kind of what we've seen. I think they've modernized, and I think there's a lot of ways that they're connecting better. I think what you have seen, in recent years is kind of a way that they do want to listen to their fans more often. I think there is hope in that regard. But I don't think it's going to be dramatically different. Whenever we get to a point where we're talking about the next level of what happens next. I think you're going to see a lot of similar. I mean, this is the way that the organization, they would be running it differently if they wanted to be running it differently. But I don't think it gets better, is what I'm saying. I think this is what it is, and I don't think it all of a sudden gets better.
So any hope of change, it's going to be along the lines of like the Burrow and Chase contracts, where they're slowly getting more modern with some of the things they do with like guaranteed money. And
maybe,
that kind of
I
stuff.
don't know. Like I honestly, I don't think anybody can totally answer that. It's totally uncharted waters. But I just, I don't think it gets better.
This is kind of a tough question for you, right? Like, because you have to cover the team. They're like, hey, talk about how bad this ownership group is and front office is. And
that's what covering the Bengals is, though, Mark. I mean,
yeah, it's not the first time we get this question.
Unlike most teams, on other writers, if you go across people, I talk to my athletic colleagues, how much are you writing about? You're writing about ownership. I mean, covering NFL is talking about ownership in every market, but here it's so prevalent because it's so much a part of the conversation because of the history, and now they haven't had success in certain areas and things like that. So that's what covering the team is. That's what covering the Bengals entails, is having to be honest about what you think about and what the truth is about ownership. And that's how I see it. I'm sure they would probably sit here and see it differently.
One more combo question here about ownership before we move on to some other Dey Dark topics. This one's from Paul C. He says, first off, everybody's lauding Jermaine Burton for doing the right things and always being at the facility. Has anyone considered that he's just living there because he's trying to save money on rent? Nice quick Jermaine Burton burn off the top. He says, now the real question. You often say the Bengals front office doesn't care about threats from players like Hendrickson and Stewart. They look at contract standoffs in June and yawn. At what point, when they know they'll do something to get the players signed, considering the state of the current team, do they recognize they can fix this without continuing to shoot themselves in the foot? These aren't huge issues. How can they continue to hamper the preparedness of the team by being stubborn? I'm so frustrated with this team that it makes me want to give up and stop following them. Don't do that. Keep listening to the podcast. They never learn, and unless they're happy with a disgruntled Hendrickson sitting out until midseason and mailing in a few games to preserve his eligibility, their stubbornness could cost them again if they don't resolve it. The market gets reset, and he'll want more. Good Lord, I love this team. Can't stand the ownership. And we're also going to combine this just to show where this is coming from. This is from Australia. Same veins. This is all corners of the earth.
Firing from all corners of the globe.
Have the same questions. And this guy sums it up a little bit more succinctly. He says, I know the Bengals front office is pretty much the reason why this franchise consistently puts roadblocks in place to sustain success. My question is quite simply, why do they act like they do? Is there a disconnect between what the fan base and personnel want and what ownership values?
Yeah, I mean, I think they act differently than most teams in the NFL because they're built differently than most teams in the NFL. As an old school football family, they don't have the never-ending Scrooge McDuck vault of coins that you have with the Arthur Blanks and the Stan Kroenkes of the world. And it's like, these owners where the owners don't just have a football team, they have a football team and a hockey team and a basketball team and a soccer club, and it's Shad Khan. And, it's just like they operated as toys built to win, and the Bengals operate it more as an old school business. And I'm sure they don't like the term mom and pop, but in comparison to the rest of the NFL, it's kind of what they are. They're that store on the corner, trying to survive while the Walmarts of the world and the Home Depots of the world come in and try to crush you. And so they are in a smaller market. These are all realities. And so I think they operate protectively because of that. And now the other side is, but the NFL is writing you these massive checks. You're not short for money. It's the value. You're in the Fortune 500. Like, it's you're not hard up. And so that's the disconnect, is that they still view themselves as I think the old hard charging, hoping this business will work out family. And I think that everybody else is saying, this is the NFL. You guys are fine. Let's focus on the winner, and let's get a little bit more, up with the times in that regard. You're asking about the disconnect and the different views. I think it is based in how they came up in the NFL versus the way that the vast majority now of ownership has come up in the NFL. So can we get some more fun Hudday Dark topics? I feel like it's almost too dark. Like we've almost gone too far with some of this. I just, I like the fun darkness.
Okay, how about this? Because this is a little bit more Hudday Dark, but for a different team. This is from Scott. He says that his wife is a rabid Steelers fan. Weird off the top, but hates Aaron Rodgers. She hates him so much that she made a commitment that she will denounce the team and support the Bengals for 1 year if he becomes a Steeler. Now that this day has come and Mr. Rodgers' new neighborhood is Pittsburgh, should I embrace her 1 year Bengals fandom? Should I tell her she isn't welcome and to find another team to latch onto? Help, my marriage may hinge on your advice. That's not a great spot to be in. That's a Hudday Dark spot for your marriage if it's going to hinge on this podcast. But how do you assess this one?
A lot of pressure here. I will say we talk about this podcast as therapy for Bengals fans often. I don't want it to be couples therapy. I don't want to feel like I've had anything to do with this. I will say you got to question how this marriage launched in the first place with a Bengals fan and a Steelers fans. Aren't you just diametrically opposed internally? Like, isn't there just separate points of view that really shouldn't have been coexisting in the first place? That said, I think the only way this survives is if you welcome her into the Bengals side for a year. For now, I think that's the only way it survives. Outside of that, if you're going to choose violence, I don't think that's going to be the answer in a loving relationship.
Yeah. I mean, you got to you're right. You have to look at the mindset that went into this when it started. Because a Steelers fan, they're thinking like, hey, everything's going to turn out fine. At worst, this marriage will be 500 or better. And then the Bengals fan is kind of going into it thinking like, maybe this is going to be our year. Maybe this is our marriage. And so those aren't always the same starting point with that. So I can see how this is a tricky situation. But I do think you bring her onto the bandwagon because this could be a great year. And if she has some fun, you might just steal one of their fans. That's pretty big to get a lifelong rabid fan to denounce their team and go to a rival. That's how much she hates Aaron Rodgers. She must not really care for his podcast appearances, because I don't know what other explanation, you would get there. But I can't think of a single player in the NFL that would cause me to turn my back on the entire team for a season. I'm sure that those players have been out there that I would not be psyched to have on my team, but I can't imagine being at that level where you're like, I'm just giving up on them and jumping to a rival.
Browns fans are shaking their head at you right now.
That is
fans
true.
are like, one potential example that we might have here in Cleveland.
I think that might be the most Hudday Dark thing that is currently happening is that I think it was on the episode you did with Jay. There was a Browns fan that jumped into the comments like, hey, it could be worse. You guys could be us. That's never a good place to be. If the Browns fans are saying like, hey, cheer up, you're not quite at our level yet. You're like, dang, nobody even brought you up. Why are you part of this? This is not, we didn't think it was that bad, but now they're trying to cheer us up. That's a good sign that things are maybe not the healthiest.
No doubt.
I do want to mention this. So yes, let your wife on the bandwagon, keep your marriage intact. Don't let her go back to the Steelers afterwards. That's my advice. We did get a lot of great questions, but they're just in the vein of Hudday Dark. I do have to say this. We got one from a guy that tried to give himself a nickname. You can't do that. He signed off with his real name. He's like, hey, if you mention this on the show, can you call me Aaron Cowabunga? Like, no, we're not going to give you Aaron Cowabunga. Like, you can't just give yourself a nickname. We've got standards on this show. We're willing to talk about Achilles Smith and Jackson Carman. We're willing to go there for 1 week.
And death and divorce.
Right.
I mean, but we're not going to Aaron Cowabunga.
We'll go dark, but we're not going to give yourself a nickname dark. Not having that. Our next question, Zach Taylor in the front office has taken great pains to create a positive culture in the locker room with former captains and established leaders. Who are the worst locker room cancers or just plain characters that you have come across in your time covering the team?
Okay. Well, I would say this. You got to compartmentalize this because some people that I'm going to mention here are not bad characters or locker room cancers until they decided to be. There's a few of those that, whether it be on the way out or at certain portions of their time here where it changed. So note that that's a part of this. So I'm going to kind of generalize that way. I will say it's hard to find one, despite I know there's love and he was, he played well here. It's hard not to talk about T.O. And the year that he was here and what that did. If you're talking about for the locker room and all of the attention that he brought to himself and made it all about himself. You always hear like it's about us and we over me and all of these slogans that are painted across walls in the NFL. Like Terrell Owens is the exact opposite of that, right? It was always about him, and that's fine. Totally fine. But it was terrible for that team. Like that 2010 team was a team that had no chemistry, was divided, and it brought the worst out of Chad, who was great, because the two of them combined sort of leaned into that side. The T. Ocho show, I mean, you talk about darkest moments in Bengals history. The T. Ocho show during the season from hell that forced Carson out, like that's the Mike and Marvin press conference. All of that portion of the program is pretty dark. And it was kind of set off by T.O.'s divisiveness and sort of locker room cancerousness, if you will. I'm not putting it all on him. There's a lot there. But I'm just saying that was a big part of that. So that he'll be in the conversation. I mean, the kind of the perfect Pac-Man combination has to be in there in terms of some of the undisciplined stuff. I mean, Pac-Man was crazy, but on the field, you were getting, the competitiveness crazy, and it often went too far. But the stuff off the field that was happening, and Tez was like two different people. Like you'd hear these stories of him as this kind, soft soul in these like quiet times, and then you just see a lot of the opposite when he was in the building and on the field and stuff like that. And I have a hard time reconciling with some of the stuff that we saw there that wasn't good, especially at the end. Especially at the end, what was happening was a massive part, a central part of the entire demise of those teams. There was a lot of that going on, but it's hard not to include them. I will say the end of the Carlos Dunlap era, the napalming at the end when he's putting the house up for sale and he's putting the rotations on Twitter and like it's like I mean, you don't get much more cancerous than that, but he just wanted out, and he was a great, a really great guy when he was there. Like he was a big part of those good teams and about the right stuff. It was just that moment in time, that particular mix.
Get you in the convo.
Yeah, it's one of the all-time exits. That's for sure. And so hard not to put him in there. So I would say also honorable mention in that same era to the entire offensive line that watched the fight in Miami without getting up off the bench. One of my favorite screenshots of all time is everyone basically fighting on the field and the 5 Bengals offensive linemen sitting there like, nah, dog, screw this team.
We're good.
So shout out to all of them for not being about it. And so I put them on the list too.
Those are mostly names that you'd expect in terms of people that you didn't like covering. Are there any more recent players that would make your list from the Burrow era? Anybody that was a tough cover?
The Sheldon Rankins situation probably deserves an honorable mention. It's hard to like be definitive on it because he obviously was dealing with this health thing and how much was that a part of it. But there was kind of a little bit of a jaded, toxic environment amongst the defense last year. I don't think he helped that. He was, but it's hard to say like to put him up with some of the other situations and names because of how it ended. And like, I respect the guy's health, but like it was a lot of money paid to do certain things, didn't seem kind of angry about the entire situation and where he was at. And that filtered down to some of the other people. So I might put him into the mix. Not that he's vindictive. It was really bad for that defense last year.
Yeah, that makes sense. This one is another interesting one from Jacob. He says, not to go all Dey Dark, but can we talk about the new Rock and Rule the Jungle segment at every home game for the start of the fourth quarter? I was a huge fan when it was introduced for the Ravens wildcard game in 2023 and the Stranger Things dude shredded Master of Puppets and Welcome to the Jungle. It really set the stage for an awesome end to an awesome game. I can't say the same for the most recent additions. Am I the only one that has felt like most of the musicians have kind of butchered the guitar intro and sucked the air out of the stadium rather than energizing the crowd? As a season ticket holder, I've looked around on more than one occasion and seen opposing fans laughing. Maybe the Bengals could do something like hockey anthem singers where they hire a professional to do this for the whole season. Perhaps a Growl Pal is up to the challenge. Can we get Jay to play guitar? Thanks to the whole team and for the great content and continuing to make his work commute much more interesting. Are you the only one to have that complaint? Yes, you are. I've not heard a single other person mention this. We got 8,000 ownership questions. We got one Rock and Rule the Jungle segment questions. So, yep, you are the only one.
Yeah. And you know what? That's why I like it. I like it when we pick very small things to be really hung up about. So I like this. I appreciate Jacob's complaint here. Here's what I'll say about it, because it's really hard. The press box is a little quieter. We don't get the true feel of especially moments like what you're talking about. So I can't pretend to be an expert on it, but I do know the sound systems are very hard to deal with and do take adjustments. And you are, having to do it live, and there's nerves with that. You don't want to mess. Why can't this just be pre-recorded and played in? Why can't? Is someone really going to be judging like, oh, his fingers aren't on the same spots that I'm seeing as he does Welcome to the Jungle? And I know it's cooler if it's technically live, but there's a lot of chance involved. I think let that person pre-record something, rip it, be comfortable, get it right, and then go up there and essentially air guitar it, play it, but air guitar it, not hooked up, and play in their good version over top of it. That's my suggestion, so that I'm okay, because I'm okay with playing guitar. Just have it sound good. That's all.
Yeah, in a show, though, where we talked about the stadium issues and maybe the team leaves the city, we've talked about Trey Hendrickson and ownership and this and that. Fixing the guitar segment is pretty low on my list. If that's the only thing that got fixed over the next year, I might have a few more issues, I think.
Yeah, but we just fixed it. So
we did. It's solved. Hopefully people are listening to this and can put those changes into place. How about an ambush light question on Dey Dark? Are you ready for that?
Yeah, of course.
All right. This one's from Brian. He says, I have not heard Paul as exasperated about anything as he was when Mo asked him about Shamar Stewart's unloading to the media. I want Paul to power rank his worst topics he's forced to write about yearly or all time if he wants. It could be individual instances or just categories of topics. What do you like having to cover the least?
Well, spring contract haggling would be up there. There's no doubt. I mean, you're far off from deadlines. It's people trying to gain leverage. You're trying to use the media. None of it. It's just, it feels wasteful. It makes people mad. And it's kind of an ugly, but understandable. It's part of the NFL business. I understand why we have to write about it. I understand that you guys keep reading it, no matter how many times we write it. And that's why you see it so much. That's the thing. People like, if you guys read certain topics more, we would write you'd see a lot more of them from everybody. And that's not your fault. Like, it's what's interesting. It's what you want to know. And so I respect that. We write it, and we're going to keep writing what you guys want to know. I don't like writing that. I find it wasteful. Only topped by pre-free agency mock drafts. There's nothing I have more to say. I respect draft culture. I love the draft. You guys know, you've listened. I've had a podcast for talking about the Bengals for a dozen years now. I love talking about the draft. When it's time for the draft and we can talk specifically about what's going to happen, not just speculation. And pre-free agency mock drafts, you could talk about players and classes and generalizations and things like that, especially we even know the draft order mock drafts or way too early mock drafts, right? But really that segment in the like January, February mock draft season, having to do those is brutal because it's just everybody's needs change. You have to go through the combine still. You go through the process still. I find it true. And you haven't had time. The coaches haven't even gotten in on scouting or looking at what they want or talk. Guys are still getting hired. I just having to go there at that point. I just don't. I disdain. I find it wasteful. That's why I don't mind writing about anything. I don't like feeling like I'm wasting my time on something that means nothing. And I feel like that's what that is.
But at least covering this team that you have a little bit less of that, right? Because the teams that are out of it in January, those fan bases are like, all right, we're moving on to the draft. You know, who are going to be the top 10 guys? Who's good in college? Like usually the Bengals will keep things at least interesting through the end of the regular season, hopefully a few weeks into the playoffs. So you don't have to quite jump into that draft stuff right when everybody else does. That's the one little upside, right? Like at least you could hang on to that.
Except the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and then the majority of my career. Yeah. But yeah, no.
Anything
outside
else
of a 2-year window, in 21 and 22, it's kind of been what it's been. Yeah, I'll throw like weekly injury reports. You know, the like Thursday update on T. Higgins hamstring. What kind of practice did he do? Did he stretch? Did he like following the minor injury that I know that fantasy people want to know, like we have to write it. I don't find any enjoyment in that. It's again, wasteful. Hat watch, training camp holdout. Yeah, having to constantly update Jamar Chase in a hat. You know, or this year, Trey Hendrickson in a golf polo or whatever it's going to be. I don't know. Like that's the holdout, any sort of hold in situation. Not fun. Not something I enjoy doing at all. Fire the coach. like I don't. You have to do it. Like it's truly like you have to do it, but it's speculating on jobs. I try to do as little of that as possible. When it feels like it has to be written, I write it. You know, I did that with Lou Anarumo after the Pittsburgh home game last year. But it was like you spend a lot of time like we're gonna do this conversation because I don't want to. You don't like I don't like speculating on people's jobs like that. In terms of in the middle of a season. So I don't like fire the coach season. That's probably the most obvious, unless there's something I'm forgetting.
Yeah, and all in all, I think you like your job, right? Like now that we're starting to pull out of the Dey Dark space, and there's plenty of good things about it.
Absolutely. No, I that's just stuff that's just kind of annoying. That's you know, what is that? 10% of the job, 20% of the job. I mean, the 80% is fun and great. It's football.
So we've kind of gotten through it now with the Hudday Darks. I mean, obviously,
I think we did. We went to some dark places, but we're okay.
Yeah, hopefully this checks some boxes for some of the questions that we get every single week. We do have a Growl Pal spotlight update where this is the part of the show where we kind of highlight some cool things that the Growl Pals are up to, whether it's a small business, charity, golf outing, that type of thing. We talked about Ryan raising money for the Marine Corps Marathon, and he's running with Ainsley's Angels. Basically, he's trying to raise more money for this thing than his brother. I like the sibling rivalry of it. We talked about this before. He did give me an update that he did beat his brother in fundraising thanks to the Growl Pals that donated. Yeah. So there were a handful of you that did jump in there financially. We appreciate that. That's always fun to see the Growl Pal community coming together for a good cause. You love to see it.
The good cause being someone beating their brother at something, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, the charity is
and Ainsley's Angels. Yeah. I guess that's good too.
All right, money for them. Sure,
brother. Everybody can get behind that. Everybody can get behind that. No, that was great. I said, and there was a lot of money went into their fundraising, so good for them, man. Great stuff. Thanks, Growl Pals.
We also have our Meth Raccoon weird story of the week. Do you think we have time for that, or should we kick it to next week?
Let's kick it. How about we tease it to next week?
Okay, so we got this submitted to us twice or three. A few different people tagged us in this story because they knew this is going to be podcast fodder. We'll just tease maybe we'll just give the headline. The headline of the story is Mule Riding Kentucky Man accused of unleashing raccoon in bar after being turned away. You know that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts there. But we'll try to cut this off here and move. Although that sounds like it could have gone to some Dey Dark places, it does.
That story took the cake in a week where there was also a cicada that caused a car wreck. So you know that the mule riding Kentucky guy is up to some real chicanery that's going to be fun to talk about.
Quickly get your comedy plugs in. Where are you? Where are you?
I'm going to be at Appleton, Wisconsin at Skyline Comedy Club this weekend, the 20th and 21st or 2nd, whatever, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Come out to a show. And then I'll be at I'll have the rest of the dates next week, but I think I'm going to go bananas for a short set on June 24th. So that's another one. And then October 9th through 10th or 9th through 12th is going to be my next full weekend in Cincinnati. So all you local Growl Pals, you can put that on the calendar now.
Love that.
Dad life. We can get into dad life.
Yeah. You've got Disney dad life, right?
I do.
All right, let me sneak mine in, and you can go into because you have a bigger topic. I just have a small one. So we've been kind of starting to get into watching some nostalgic movies. We're in that time, 8 and 5, like a good time. So we're kind of looking through what's a good entry point into some like 80s, 90s kids oriented movies. And I decided I honestly hadn't seen this movie in probably 35 years, as one does. But we started with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Have you guys watched? Yeah, I'm trying to ease in. Like, I'm just trying to ease in. Where would you, Goonies? I'm trying to find something that wasn't going to be too scary. And it's like, because my 5-year-old, I'm still trying to not like have it turn into nightmares where I'm up all night. You know?
I mean, The Lion King, I don't know if you're talking about early
The Lion King
nostalgia. Like,
how much death do you need? Like, when they've seen Disney, I'm trying to get out of cartoons. I'm trying to get
out of cartoons. All right, that's a caveat you got to mention when you're talking
no cartoons
in 30. Yes.
No
All right.
cartoons. Trying to
Now,
get into like real movies. Okay.
I mean,
As much as
Jurassic Park could be up there.
right. Yeah. Yeah,
So you,
sure.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I haven't
Honey, I
seen
Shrunk
that
the
one
Kids.
in
Now,
forever either.
have you so there is if you have watched this movie recently, there are some wild parental plot questions with this. This dude figures out that he shrunk his children, that they're somewhere in a backyard, admits it is completely dangerous, understands any number of ways that they could die, and he's out there with a magnifying glass over top, making sure not to step on anything to look for them. And as it starts to get a little dark, he and his wife just kind of sit on the back porch, back deck, talk about it, and decide, we'll look again in the morning. Let's go get some shut eye. They're just going to go take sleep. Your kids are gone, potentially dying. And they're like, I don't know. And then they wake up in the morning and he's just like casually having some breakfast. Like, we'll get to it. I got to have my Cheerios. And what do you do? There is so much lack of concern from these parents about their kids and their neighbors' kids that are just gone, that are just lost, and admitting they could die by being this small. This little X-ray thing has never worked before. You have no idea about how messed up they are, and there is no urgency amongst these parents to the point that he's casually thinking about things, eating his Cheerios when one just shows up and he almost eats it. Not even thinking about it. I could not believe, like, I just never remembered. I'd never seen it through the parental view. Just a total lack of concern over any of the children's well-being.
What a better introduction to 80s parents for your kids, though, to be like, hey, this is what they were like. They were not going to interrupt getting 8 solid hours of sleep for anybody's well-being. You know the importance of a morning ritual? That's what you need to take away from this. You get your Cheerios, and then you save the lives of your loved ones. Then
and it was truly like days of this. I mean, unbelievable.
The nonchalance, that would be a little bit stark to experience during your search and rescue process.
I hadn't thought of it that way. That you just like take long, just give up and not really seem to care. Oh, it'll figure itself out.
Yeah, these kids are always shrinking themselves.
All right, how was your Disney trip? How did
Disney
it go?
was awesome. We had a good time. We're still recovering from it, still in that Disney blues period of trying to adjust to real life. My oldest daughter, she was so bummed about the real world after being in the Disney bubble for 5 days. She just compared the rest of the world to a big, fat, sad McDonald's. And I kind of understand that. Even if I can't explain it, it still makes sense to me. But to keep things in line with the tone of Dey Dark, I do have a few Dey Dark Disney anecdotes.
Yeah.
You always see, and it's interesting to see when this happens, but every parent at Disney has a different breaking point. Some are better at keeping that, in line of being like, hey, this is how it's going to go. If we need to pull the plug and go to the hotel pool just to keep everybody happy, we do that. And then maybe go back to the park, take a second stab, who knows? But then you also see the parents that are like, we paid a ton of money for this. We are getting every ounce of enjoyment out of this. Nothing will stop us. I saw a dad shove his kid in line at Jungle Cruise, like when we still had another half hour to go. I'm like, this is not a good vibe. You're not going to make up by the time this ride starts. But I guess the kid, he was probably like 6 or 7, had been shoving his dad. And rather than being like, all right, let's not do that, the dad just shoved him hard. And he was like, how do you like it? And I'm like, this is where we're at? I mean, it is 10:45 a.m. We're not even, it's not 3 p.m. under that Orlando heat. You broke early on this. And maybe this was day like 3 or 4 for them, but I did not expect to see that one at the Magic Kingdom. Tom Sawyer Island, that was another one for me. I don't know if you have ever been to Tom Sawyer Island at Magic Kingdom. But my wife made us all do that because they're closing it. That's going to be where the new Cars Land is and everything. And it's been there since the park is opened. So she made us all go to Tom Sawyer Island. And I have to say that it is the best themed attraction in all of Disney because you get there and then you realize that it sucks. And you have to take a ferry boat to get back and it's not there. You're just stuck. You're just stuck on Tom Sawyer Island in the middle of Magic Kingdom, and you feel like you got tricked into painting a fence. It felt like the most Tom Sawyer thing that you could have imagined. Like, damn, I fell for this. This is insane. So
Yeah.
did not enjoy Tom Sawyer Island. My kids, one of their highlights was taking the Skyliner to and fro Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios and stuff. I will say we dodged a huge bullet there because our last night, you know, we had done Animal Kingdom and we did the pool and pizza, and you know, they got something from the little gift shop at the resort. We were kind of buttoning up the trip. They wanted to do one last ride on the Skyliner over the lagoon, over the little Hourglass Lake or whatever, while we were watching the Epcot fireworks, right? So we did that short little ride out, short little ride back. It was magical, perfect, nice end of the trip. Maybe 10 minutes after us, there was a family that got stuck over the lake for an hour. Their story went viral on TikTok. They had to break into the emergency container under the seat that had water and stuff for their kids. And I mean, I could not imagine the hell that would have been if we had gotten caught in that at the end of our trip, just to be trapped, suspended over this lake for a full hour. It would have been a nightmare.
Man, that really tops when we were just kind of stuck on the uphill of the Beastie for about 10 minutes.
Right.
That is frightening. Just suspended above Earth while your kids freak out in a literal glass case of emotion.
Yeah. So that was maybe because even riding it, we got stopped a couple times for like 10 seconds. You're like, what's going on here? Is this normal? And the thing's only been in operation for 5 or 6 years. So you don't really know if they've got everything worked out. It was the fastest way to get to and from all the parks. Like, it's much better than the buses and the monorail and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there were times where I'm like, is this going to go sideways? And then to hear that story where it did and somebody got stuck up there for a full hour over the lake is terrifying.
I was just going to say before you started your story about, man, the Skyliner's just the best. You never hear of anybody who's had a bad experience on it. Like, it's the most fun way to get around. Kids love it. Parents love it. It's successful. And then you tell me this and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll never ride it. Maybe just we should never recommend it to anyone because it's a high risk reward, right? It's like,
yes.
it's when it works, it's the best.
It's perfect.
When it doesn't, it's life changing.
But you got to look at the upside.
A scar.
It's good engagement on social media. You'll get a lot of traction. You'll go viral on TikTok like this family did. And I think they got some nice cold free bottled water after their ordeal. And I think some free Mickey ears. So it did not work out. But at least you get that social media engagement, which is clutch.
Those Mickey ears aren't cheap, okay? That's a
no,
good
they
thing.
aren't. Golly, they are not.
Get your Mickey ears before you go to Disney, people. Like, don't get caught up in buying the Disney ears on the spot. You don't want to have to do that. No Mickey ears at Disney. Don't do it.
Yeah, well, I could have used that advice about 2 weeks ago, so thanks for that now.
How much Disney advice do you need us to give on this show?
Like, we've been talking about Disney
ears for decades.
I didn't know. Yeah, there were some other pitfalls that we ran into, but it was fun to see what souvenirs the 5-year-old left with. It was the most insane stuff. She didn't even get Disney ears, but she did, for some reason, get like these really heavy cast iron keys after riding Pirates of the Caribbean. And it's like, what are you doing? What is this for? They don't unlock anything. This isn't even like a fun Disney-esque themed thing. You just have heavy metal keys that you get to take through airport security. Fun.
How did airport security react to that?
I think they see so much crap leaving from Orlando that they're like, just send it all through. We don't know what's a souvenir, what's a weapon. Just, are there kids? Yeah, they can take whatever they want on this plane.
Yeah, it's the Orlando airport. Everything's expected to be terrible.
Yep.
All right. This was fun. It was dark. We went to the darkest moments, but we came out and we saw the light on the other side. I appreciate that. This was good. I think we'll see. If you liked this, let us know. The Growler Podcast at gmail.com, what you really thought about it. If you thought it was fun, and we'll maybe do it more. Maybe we'll do it every year. But all right.
Hopefully we
Thanks,
don't have
everybody.
To do it every year. Hopefully
it would just be rehashing the same old topics.
Right,
hopefully it's not all dark. But it was fun to do at least once. So tell us your thoughts, and if you have any questions about anything, let us know, and we'll be back next week. So we'll talk to you then. Have a good one, everybody.